Hello. This is the first of 3 devotionals that will be centered around Lazarus being raised from the dead. And this was a passage that was originally supposed to have been talked about last Sunday, but last Sunday I talked about a passage that was supposed to have been talked about a couple weeks before that, so this is all part of adjusting to our new normal. But I do hope and pray that you will continue to follow us throughout this week leading up to Holy Week, and also for the Holy Week services that will be online. We've got some really unique services planned, and I hope you will join us. I invite you to hear these words from John chapter 11, verses 1 through 16. Now a man named Lazarus was sick. He was from Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. This Mary, whose brother Lazarus now lay sick, was the same one who poured perfume on the Lord and wiped his feet with her hair. So the sisters sent word to Jesus, "Lord, the one you love is sick." And when he heard this, Jesus said, "This sickness will not end in death. No, it is for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it." Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. Yet when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed where he was 2 more days. Then he said to his disciples, "Let us go back to Judea." "But Rabbi," they said, "a short while ago, the Jews, they tried to stone you, and yet you are going back there?" Jesus answered, "Are there not 12 hours of daylight? A man who walks by day will not stumble, for he sees by this world's light. It is when he walks at night that he stumbles, for he has no light." After this, he went on to tell them, "Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I'm going there to wake him up." Well, the disciples replied, "Lord, if he sleeps, he will get better." But Jesus had been speaking of his death. But his disciples thought he meant actual sleep. So then he told them plainly, "Lazarus is dead. And for your sake, I'm glad I was not there, so that you may believe. But let us go to him." Then Thomas, called Didymus, said to the rest of the disciples, "Let us go, that we may die with him." The word of God for the people of God. For this we give thanks to God. As we go through this story, there are a few things that jump out at me. First of all, Jesus gets word that his good friend is ill, but he kind of shrugs it off. He doesn't just drop everything and go. He sticks around for a couple more days. Then when he does finally break the news to his disciples, they're going back, they're not too keen on the idea. They remind Jesus that, you know what? Last time we passed that way, remember what they tried to do to you? They tried to stone you. Might not be so good to go right now. Maybe we should wait a bit. But Jesus responds to their concerns by telling them, you know what? Those who walk during the day, they don't stumble. That's because they see the light of this world. But those who walk at night stumble because the light is not in them. I love this imagery of light and darkness that John uses throughout this book. If you go back to the very first chapter, which talks about Jesus coming into the world, we see that same imagery. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God, and in him was life, and life was the light of all people. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it. A life and a light came into the dark world. Darkness did not, will not, and cannot overcome it. That was the message that Jesus was trying to tell his disciples. He's trying to tell them, keep the faith. Walk in the light, and nothing will be able to overcome it, no matter how dark the situation may be. Now, I think that's a message that truly does resonate with us, especially today. No matter what challenges we face, no matter how stir-crazy we may be from being cooped up at home, no matter how isolated we may feel, it's good to remember that God is with us. We can face tomorrow. Now, the end of this passage is really quite interesting because there's this dialogue between Jesus and his disciples. He tells the disciples, you know what? Lazarus is sleeping. I think most of us who've been parents at one time or another have had to explain to a young child about that sleeping bunny on the side of the road. Disciples just don't get it. They don't understand. Jesus has come right out and tells them, you know what? Lazarus is not sleeping. He's dead. But he also goes on to tell them, you know what? It's going to be okay. He's able to use this as kind of a teaching moment. Jesus already knows what he's going to do, but he also realizes that this is very important for the continuing learning process for the disciples. The other part of this story that really kind of sticks out to me is that despite their fear, despite their confusion, the disciples are still willing to walk in faith with Jesus. Even Thomas, who turns to the others and says, you know what, guys? We might as well go with him. We might as well even die with him. Now for us, the future seems unsure. We've seen our world turned upside down, yet through it all, we can walk with Christ and have the faith and the assurance of how great God's faithfulness truly is.
Changes
Amen.